Well, good morning, y'all. I hope that y'all have found a way to kind of limit the distractions and spend some time with God this morning as it's still Sunday and it's still the Lord's Day. And I've got to say that last week was definitely a first for me. If it's Sunday, typically we're at church. And in all of my life, all of my long 20 years, I never really thought there was a better place to be than to be in church. Whenever something bad was going on or whatever it may be, the best place you could possibly be would be church. And while this pandemic is spreading, it's something that we have no control over. It's, I guess, been the wiser decision to have our worship services this way, to spread God's word in this manner. And I was actually driving to my girlfriend's house last Sunday morning about 10:30, which would be very, very late for Sunday school, which I should have been a little more time for. But I was passing by churches and their parking lots, and I kept noticing there'd be, 2, 3 vehicles there. No doubt the pastor, maybe the music pastor, and some staff that were preparing a service for their congregation. And it was really sad to me because nothing better to see than a full church house on God's day. In my opinion, there's not. Nothing better to see. But I got to my girlfriend's house, and we pulled up Facebook. I tried on my computer. I couldn't get that to work, so we resorted to my cell phone to pull up Brother Jake's message from our church, and we watched it sitting on the couch. And I got through with that, and I began to scroll through Facebook and see all of these different church services, sermons that were being broadcasted on Facebook. And it kind of brought a smile to my face, because despite how bad it looked driving by all those empty churches on a Sunday morning, here we have, in one individual day, more of the gospel preached on the Facebook platform of social media than likely ever before in a single day. Reaching no telling how many people that would not usually be in a church service on a Sunday morning. Now, I still believe wholeheartedly that if you have a church or you go to church, that anybody, you ought to be in church on a Sunday. You just ought to be on church on Sunday. It's the Lord's Day. It's your way to pay respect. And I don't really, unless you're very different from me, sitting at home, there's a whole lot more distractions that will take you away from God's word and His worship than there is in the house of the Lord. But even in a bad time like this, it just goes to show you that God is winning. And He is always winning, and He has always won. God will and has and always wins. And that's going to lead me right to the topic of my sermon, the sermon that I prepared. And I have it titled, Only Winning. And I'm sure most of you have heard that in life or in games or whatever it may be, you either win or you lose. And I believe that wholeheartedly. There's no gray area. There's no participation medals that are given out. Or maybe you've heard that you win some and you lose some. And that's going to happen all throughout life, all throughout whatever's going on. You're going to lose some battles, you're going to win some battles. So if you've got your Bibles, and I hope you do, we're going to turn to Daniel chapter 3 and look at a group of guys that it seems like are definitely losing. That's going to be a familiar story to most of you about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel chapter 3. And we're going to read most of the chapter when we get in verse 1. So this time, King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura, the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "This is what you are commanded to do, O peoples, nations of men of every language. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." Therefore, as soon as they had heard the sound of the horn, the flute, lyre, the harp, and all other kinds of music, and all the peoples and nations and men of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, has set up an idol and is forcing people to worship it. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever." They're praising him right here. Said, "You have issued a decree, O king, that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, of the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipes, and all other kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold. And that whoever does not fall down and worship be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, O king. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up." So we've got a bunch of tattletales coming in out of jealousy, the power he's given some Jews, telling Nebuchadnezzar that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego aren't doing what he's commanded. So furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipes, and all other kinds of music, you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made. Very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue from my hands?" So there's the threat. The threat to these three young men. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter." We don't need to defend ourselves. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar became furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in the army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, and turbans, and all other clothes, were bound and be thrown in the blazing furnace. And the king's command was so urgent, and the furnace was so hot, that the flames of fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that were tied and thrown into the fire?" And they replied, "Certainly, certainly, O king." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the royal advisors crowded around them. And they saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, not a hair on their head had been singed, their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. And Nebuchadnezzar said, listen to this, "Praise be to God, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him, and they defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives, rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I decree that the people of any nation, language, who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be cut to pieces, and their house be turned into piles of rubble. For no other God can save in this way." And I just want to give you guys a little bit of background on what's going on here. And even just from this chapter, the beginning of this chapter, you could definitely say that these young men were losing. But take it a little bit step further back. Sometime before this, the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, had raided Judah and Israel. Okay? And with that raid, he takes 10,000 people captive. Basically, he takes the rich people, he takes the able people, he takes the working people, the talented people, and anybody with any kind of education, the smarter, able people, and he leaves the poor, the peasants of that day and time. He leaves those people in the city and sets up some type of ruler in Israel. Well, he marches these 10,000 people out, and what was so cruel, I guess you would say, about the Babylonian Empire is whenever they would go into a land in order to prevent a rebellion, they would take the most qualified, the elite people out of that land, and they would disperse them across nations. They would sell them as slaves, so they couldn't rise up against them ever again. And so he takes these 10,000 people, and while he sells some as slaves, I'm sure he takes the smartest, the strongest, the best, and uses them in his own province for his slaves. And so, from the book of Daniel, we obviously know that Daniel is one of these people that he has kept. And then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who we know he has set at some place of authority in his kingdom. So he's hauled them away. Their country has been destroyed. They're enslaved. They have to worship their God secretly. You could definitely say these guys were losing by the world's standards. And so on top of that, Nebuchadnezzar sets up an idol. And that was something huge in this time in history. People like to make images of things to worship. You know, at today's time, our idols may be money, they may be a certain sport, they may be some celebrity. But this day and time, people made idols out of, wealthy materials, and they made images that they could worship. And Nebuchadnezzar made this great idol, and he wanted everybody to worship it, commanded everybody to worship it, or they'd be thrown into a blazing fire. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, loyal to God as they should be, faithful to God as they should be, as the one who can save, they didn't worship this idol. After all that they've been through, they're willing to stay true to their beliefs, to their God. And so what does Nebuchadnezzar say? He's like, okay, I'm going to throw you guys in the fire unless you bow down and worship this statue. And, for any of you Wyatt Earp fans out there, they pull a Doc Holliday and they're like, you know what, Nebuchadnezzar, say when. Say when. And you want to know why they had that confidence? Because they knew that burned, dead, alive, saved, they were going to win. What does it say back in the chapter? They said, in verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, said, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it. So they acknowledge that God is able, and absolutely God is able of anything he decides to do. He is able to save us, and he will rescue us from your hands. So understand this. They're not just talking about the worldly type of rescue here. They know that if they die in that furnace, they're going to go to heaven and be separated from any kind of torment King Nebuchadnezzar could ever put on them again. Okay? And if they are saved, Nebuchadnezzar would understand the power of their God and respect them. And then they're going to say, but even if he does not, that's faith. We want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. So what happens? We know from reading down farther that they're completely spared from the fire. Not a hair on their head has been singed. And guess what? They win. See, Nebuchadnezzar in this moment was against God, obviously. He was setting up statues for people to worship. And in his mind, he had set up a game plan that was faultless. I'm going to tell them that if they don't do this, I'm going to burn them. And I'm going to win, because if they don't, they'll die. Or if they do what I want, and I still win. But does he realize here that you cannot win against God? You see, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were on God's team. There's nothing they did in themselves besides having faith and putting their trust in God, being reliant on God, being on what I'm going to refer to again as God's team, the winner's team. Nebuchadnezzar couldn't win. He was fighting against or battling with God. You remember, or at least I do, whenever I was in elementary school, you go out on the playground and maybe you're playing kickball or wiffle ball or dodgeball, whatever it was, and you go to pick teams, and there's that one or two kids out there that everybody wants on their team. Because why? Because they're good. They're winners, okay? Well, I hate to break it to you, but sometimes you're going to have the best athlete, the best whatever it may be on your team, and you're going to lose. I mean, you're just flat out going to lose. Mike Trout, best player in baseball. Angels don't win every game. As a matter of fact, most times don't even win half of them, okay? But you're going to lose. God, He ain't like that. He always wins. Now, regardless of how the world may view it, how the world may view it, sometimes you can look around and say, well, that person's losing. But their faith in God, regardless of what happens in the end, they're going to win. Take, for instance, as sad as it may be, this coronavirus that is going around right now. And I think that's been a very humbling experience for a lot of people in a lot of nations. That regardless of how much we want to be, we as humans simply aren't in control. And a lot of people, I forget what the number is, I think it was around 25,000 so far out of the world, have lost their battle with this virus, have died. But some of those people, rejoicingly, on God's team, won a greater victory in that worldly loss than they could have ever been given. They're in heaven, in paradise, fever-free, sickness-free, torment-free. But on the same and opposite side of that, some of those people died a death not on God's team, on the losing team. And now they're going to spend eternity in torment. Far worse than any respiratory sickness could ever be. Why would anybody not want to be a winner? At all costs. Or in any, I say at all costs, in any event, a winner. Be on God's team. If you've got your Bibles again, I'd like you to turn to Luke chapter 23. Luke chapter 23. We're going to hear about somebody, read about somebody that really, I guess you could say, come in with a tight wind. Luke chapter 23, verses 39. Here we have Jesus on the cross. He's being crucified. And on both sides of Jesus are two rightfully convicted criminals. Two rightfully convicted criminals. And one of the criminals who hung there began hurling insults at Jesus, mocking him, said, "Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us. Save us two guilty people, even though you're innocent." So but the other criminal rebuked him and said, "Don't you fear God," he said. "Since you are under the same sentence, we are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." And then he said to Jesus, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus answered him, "I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise." I mean, talk about last moment. This guy was in the bottom of the ninth inning with 2 outs and 2 strikes, and hits a walk-off home run. You hear what I'm saying here? He had lived his whole life losing. A thief, a stealer, somebody who was going to die on that cross. And knew it. Knew he was dirty, sinful. And he looked to Jesus and said, "Please, you righteous man who has done nothing wrong, sinless Son of God, please remember me. Remember me. I believe in you. Please remember me." And what does Jesus tell him? "I tell you the truth. Today you will be with me in paradise, heaven." He was going to die on that cross and go to hell, an eternity of torment. But he joined the winning team, the team that always wins. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 and 27, we have Paul writing here to the church of Corinth. He said, "Do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we, Christians, an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air. I do not discipline my body, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. So there we have it from Paul, that you either win or you lose. And so Paul says, run this race in a way that you should win. Ain't that just like a big dud, all you competitive people? I'll tell you what, for those of you who don't know me or haven't been around me very much, I am a very competitive person. It does not matter what it is, I want to win. I just do. I want to win. I hate to lose. And that's not always a good thing, but that's just what's kind of been instilled in me. Now, Paul here, if you will, is referring to the innings of life. He's wanting the church of Corinth to understand you have to discipline your body to win against the daily battles of sin. The daily battles of sin. And he knew what kind of dedication and just self-discipline it took to make oneself usable by God and just draw close to God. He's talking about the innings, the breakdown, the small moments. He's talking about the moment that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego could have bowed down and worshipped that idol to make things easier on them. They could have given in. They could have lost in that moment. And in life, you're going to lose plenty of innings. I can look at mine and say that I've lost plenty of innings, plenty of opportunities that I had to do something better for God, to do the right thing. And for those of you who don't know me, or haven't been around me very much, I'm a huge baseball guy. That's why you keep hearing all the baseball references, the innings, the walk-off in the ninth. And just a few weeks ago, I was actually coaching a group of boys at a baseball tournament. And I mean, right off the bat, we played this team that was, in all honesty, they were on a different level. And we got smacked. Not really as bad as we could have, but we did. And nothing really to be upset about. You're going to lose some games. Okay? You're going to lose some games. The next game comes around, we start doing things right. Win the first inning, win this pitch, win that pitch, win the next inning, come down to the last inning, we're up like 4 or 5 runs. Normally in baseball, that should be a safe place. Fall apart, get comfortable, get sloppy, blow the game. Blow the game. And as a coach, I'm frustrated, but it's not my tournament. These boys are playing for themselves. My baseball time's over with. These boys are playing for them. So there's no, I can instill in them, maybe some want to a little bit more, or show some technical things they could have done better, but not really my place to get mad at them. They should do it for themselves. Well, then we get to the last game. It's real tournament time now. If you lose, you go home. And we're supposed to be playing a nice team. And they are. They're a nice team. Right off the bat, first pitch, leadoff batter from our team, hits a home run. Kid never hit a home run before. Hits his first home run, first pitch. Wow. Go through the first inning, we score 6 runs, okay? Come back, we get 3 outs. Go back out, hit again. We score 2 or 3 more runs, I can't remember. But anyways, come to the last inning, we're up by, it was either 7 or 8 runs. An even better place to be in baseball. And what happens? We blow it. We blow it. And so, this time, it's time for us to go home. Full day of baseball, 3 L's. And we take the team down to the end of the foul line. And I had 3 points that I really wanted to get in their head. Number 1, don't be okay with losing. Don't be okay with losing. You're going to lose. You're going to. But don't be okay with it. Number 2, learn when you do lose. And number 3, which is the most important in baseball, the team who wins is the team with the most runs at the end of the game. Y'all follow me here? You see, it didn't matter that we won those first few innings or those pitches in those 2 games. What mattered is what team had the most runs at the end of the game. Back to what I began to say at the beginning, is you either win or you lose. Now, if you've heard me preach before, you've likely heard me say something about a moment mentality, a mindset that I was introduced to years ago by a pastor on a mission trip. And baseball players would even know this is a pitch-by-pitch mentality. And basically what that's saying is all you can make a difference is what is happening right now. In baseball, all you can make a difference is what happens this pitch, this moment, this pitch. And as individuals, I think that's how we should focus on our life, correct? You know, you start looking at this huge picture of everything that's going on, and you get overwhelmed or distressed, and this happens and that falls apart. You have to focus on this moment. You have to focus on this pitch. You have to go and win this inning. And Paul says you've got to discipline yourselves for those battles. But what else did he say about that race? What else did he say about that race? Again, that you either win or you lose. So I want to ask you a question. A very important question. How do you know that you win in this race of life? How do you know? Of all the small, the innings, the games that go on, how do you know that whenever your time is up, or regardless of the circumstances, that you win? How do you have the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that whatever the outcome is, whatever circumstance you're put up against, that you're on the winning team? How do you wake up in the morning and you see your family or your friends, your loved ones, and you know that whatever comes throughout today, it's going to be okay? Because in the end, we can all win. You see, you can lose in a battle to worldly death and win the most important spiritual battle that a person could ever encounter. Or you can lose the battle of a worldly death. Key note, I said lose both times in a worldly manner because guess what? Everybody's going to die. And lose in a spiritual manner. And die and go to hell. And how is it that you know you're going to win? I've said it countless times. You join God's team. Simple as that. You join God's team. And maybe you're sitting at home right now, hopefully drawn in, attentive, and you're saying to yourself, you know what? Sign me up for that team. Sign me up for that team. The coronavirus is going around, and it's a sad thing. It's a very sad thing. It's a humbling thing, experience time that we're in. The world has completely changed from what it was even a month ago. At least the world that I live in. And maybe you're sitting home and you say, sign me up for that. Because I want to know that whatever this next month holds, whatever this next day holds, whatever this next hour holds, I want to be on the winning team. When the world is losing like it is right now, maybe you want to know that you can be a winner regardless. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 5 says this, for there is one God and one mediator between God and men. The man is Jesus Christ. So there we see that Jesus is the only way to God, to join God's team, to be a winner regardless of the circumstances. The only way is Jesus. And so if you look at Romans chapter 10, verses 9 through 10, it says that if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation. And it goes on in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. It says, for by grace you have been saved, and that not of yourself, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. And there we see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego about to be thrown in the fire. And some could argue that the reason they were saved is because they didn't worship that idol. Okay? And you could call that willpower or works. Works, if you will. But the thing is that they didn't worship that idol because of their faith. They had faith in God to know that if they didn't worship that idol, it would still be okay. You see, without that faith in God, they may have been tempted. So let's worship this idol. Let's be on the safe side here. Let's do this to protect ourselves. Let's try to win on our own. You can't do that. You can't do that. You have the thief on the cross, and he is already dying. He's been fighting a losing battle all of his life, engulfed in sin, made his livelihood by stealing. And in the last moments, there was no works he did here. He confessed and he believed that Jesus Christ was holy and righteous and did not deserve what he was getting, and asked Jesus to remember him. Asked for Jesus' help. And that's all you have to do to be a winner, to be on God's team. So much goes on in the world. So much goes on. And you see people that lose a battle to cancer, or you see people that lose their family members. But let me tell you something. For those people that are on God's team, for those of you that are on God's team, you may lose a battle here and there to sin. And I urge you, just like Paul said, to discipline yourself, to grit down. Don't quit. Don't quit on your battle against sin just because you know that you're saved. Don't quit just because you know that you're going to win at the end. That's another thing. Let me tell you. I've been studying Revelation with the men's group at our church. And Revelation, I just think so confusing. You can't understand it. It's best to stay away from it. No. Revelation is about two things. Jesus and God are exalted. They're the Most High. And they win. Sin doesn't win. Death doesn't win. Jesus and God, they win. And the people who are united and have a relationship with those two, with Jesus and God, are winners. Winners. And like I was saying just a while ago, you may lose a battle to sin here and there. Or you may be losing in life. You may feel like you can't win. Just engulfed in stuff you can't get over. You're never going to be able to win on your own. Nothing you do is going to make you a winner. You notice in the story we read earlier in Daniel chapter 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I guess I'd say the account. Whenever they threw those 3 men into the fire, what changed? What changed? There was a fourth person that showed up. What did Nebuchadnezzar say? He was like one of the sons of God. He was a God. That was Jesus. That was God. In there with them. You see, if he hadn't been there, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego wouldn't stand a chance against the fire. That thief on the cross wouldn't stand a chance. He would have suffocated. Died. And went to hell. Went to hell. Eternal torment. But both parties of people, all four of them, had faith and believed in the one true God. And they were made winners in spite of a losing situation. I hope y'all are able to find the time against the busy schedule to sit down in your house and listen to these preachers on Facebook, social media, and worship God just as you would if you were in church. We pray for you, and we'll be dismissed. You can go back to watching TV or whatever you're doing this Sunday morning. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for your word and just how powerful it is. Thank you for how powerful you are. And that we can know that on your team that we're winners. Nothing's going to thwart your plans or thwart what you can do, dear God, that regardless of what happens, if we're close to your relationship with you, that in the end, we win. We can spend eternity with you in heaven. There's nothing that can stop us. Thank you so much, Lord. I just ask that bottom of my heart that you be with this country. You be with those who are fighting battles against this virus. You be with the medical staff, the nurses, the doctors. You be with the world, dear Lord. Especially, dear Lord, allow the Christians, salt of the earth, spread your word in a time where people are dying left and right and going to hell. It's always an urgency to that, dear Lord, but I just ask that you would empower those people and give them the feeling of the need to go out and share your gospel. I just ask that if anybody felt a tug on their heart this morning, dear Lord, how to join your winning team, they would open up a Bible, talk to a friend, send a message on Facebook, and pursue that calling, dear Lord. Just ask you to work mighty works in this country. Thank you so much for sending your Son Jesus and mediator for us that we could join the winning team, be a winner with you, dear Lord. Not by anything we could ever do, or anything we could imagine to do, just by faith and grace. Thank you so much for that. And we pray. Amen.